what we do is we allow the candidates 2 minutes each, Glenn Hess being in position number 1, to introduce themselves, and after which we will start to ask the questions. So Glenn, it's all yours. You have a microphone in front of you.
Good evening. 7.5 years ago, you elected me to be your state attorney. And I'm asking for your vote for one more term as your state attorney. A few weeks ago, I was visiting one of our retired county judges. And during our conversation, he asked me, he said, "Counselor, give me 5 good reasons why we should elect you state attorney." Well, you know, the most important reason is because I've done the job that you elected me to do. I have provided the professional and the moral leadership that you expect from your state attorney. When I ran, one of the major planks of my platform was that I would begin a training program for the prosecutors in this office. We began that program, and it continues today, and it shows. Today, our attorneys are winning trials at a higher percentage, at a higher rate, than ever before recorded in the 14th Circuit. Moreover, they are number 5 in the state. Out of the 20 state attorneys' offices, we rank 5 in winning trials. Another thing I promised to do was begin a team approach to prosecution. Our major crimes unit has not had a defeat in the jury trial since I took office. Additionally, we have reestablished the grand jury as a functioning arm of the court system in the 14th Circuit. Over the last 7.5 years, we have seated close to 100 grand juries, and I've advised nearly all of them. I've also been before trial juries. As your state attorney, I've tried murder cases, I've tried 10, 20 life cases, and I've tried robberies. But you know, leadership requires that you show your folks the way. I've also tried the hard cases.
10 seconds.
I haven't just tried the cakewalk cases. Finally, 3 years ago, the Florida Prosecutors Association elected me their vice president. I am currently the president of the Florida Prosecutors, leading the way in Tallahassee.
Thank you, sir. By the way, I neglected to introduce our timekeeper, Brett Butler, who is one of our Chipley City Council people. He will let you know when you have 10 seconds remaining, and then when time is up, we ask you to adhere to that. Being only 2 candidates, compared to some of the larger races, we will give you some latitude. Also bear in mind that when it's your turn to answer a question, you can use that time in any way you like, whether you answer the question directly or not. Mr. Wilson, it's your turn.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Greg Wilson, and I've proudly served as the Chief Assistant State Attorney for Mr. Hess at the State Attorney's Office here for the past 6 years. I've been a prosecutor for 13 years. I've worked here in Washington County. I was the chief here in Washington County when Mr. Hess first took office. I was also the chief of Holmes County and Jackson County. I've worked caseloads here in each one of our counties and our communities, and I got to know the good people in Washington County, Holmes, Jackson, Gulf, Calhoun, and Bay County. My history started out in Bay County as a police officer, where I learned on the streets that no matter how good your case is, no matter how hard you work, if the prosecutor isn't involved in that case, if the prosecutor doesn't care about the case, if the prosecutor isn't invested in the case, then that case may not go where it needs to be, and justice isn't always served. So I made it a point as a prosecutor to always bring that approach, to look at the needs of the victim, the needs of the community, the input of law enforcement, and to make sure that the attorneys that I supervised held that same standard and took that same approach to their cases to ensure the safety of our community. As your next state attorney, I want to use the resources of that office, which are limited, to make sure that our most vulnerable are always protected, that the innocent, the children, that the elderly, they have the very best protection and service that can be afforded and provided by a leading state attorney. I've been engaged in the community, serving on numerous boards, and including the Washington County Teen Court when I was up here, the Bay County Chamber of Commerce. I'm active in the community, I'm engaged in the community. And to be engaged, you can be informed of what's going on and what's important. Because what matters most in Washington County and in Chipley doesn't necessarily equate to what's going on in Bay County right now. And blanket approaches don't work. You have to have someone in the state attorney's office who has the leadership to build teams, not divide them, and to lead from the front.
10 seconds.
To take on the challenges that each community faces. At this time in our nation, we're facing many challenges. And I'm up to that challenge, and I want to be your state attorney to work with you to protect you and your family as we move forward.
Thank you, sir. We will now start with questions. We are going to ask almost any question that has been submitted, with the exception of those that are obviously mean-spirited. Being that both gentlemen have served in that office, we're not too worried about lack of information as we would sometimes with an incumbent versus someone who has not been in that office. However, even within that latitude, we're going to err on the side of caution and be as fair as possible to these candidates. We're going to start off with a softball question, and Glenn, you answer first on this one. What is the job description of the state attorney?
Well, as I said, the purpose of the state attorney is to provide moral and professional leadership for the people that works for them. We support the law enforcement agencies throughout the circuit. We also have a responsibility to go to the legislature and make sure that the criminal justice system is not eroded through legislation. You know, last year we had to go to Tallahassee and preserve this death penalty as it was being attacked in Florida, and we were able to do that. Additionally, the state attorney is the well, he's basically the person that makes sure that the state attorney's office stays on the right track. You know, I came from the bench. I had a chance to see the entire system through the judicial eyes, through the prosecutor's eyes, and I've been providing the direction for the state attorney's office. And the direction that we've had is very simple to put: do the right thing. That's the main goal of our state attorney's office: do the right thing.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wilson.
The first and foremost role of the state attorney is to utilize the resources effectively and efficiently to make sure that every one of the members of our community are safe. Law enforcement puts their lives on the line every single day, and it's the state attorney that sets the priority and precedence as to how the resources are utilized to prosecute the cases that are brought before us. Each and every case is unique, and each and every case has to be evaluated on the merits, on the evidence, and on the impact that it has on the victim, the community, and from the input of law enforcement. You look at those cases and you make a determination as to what's important. And it's the state attorney that sets that precedence. He decides where to allocate those resources. In my administration, the focus is going to be on protecting the vulnerable, the children, and the elderly. Currently, there is not a single prosecutor that specializes in just exploitation of elderly crimes. And that is a growing trend in our communities. People come in with good intentions to take care of ailing and elderly family members so they don't have to go into nursing homes, and frequently find out that they help themselves to their bank accounts and clean them out. We need a prosecutor that focuses just on that specialization. That's one of the things that I'm going to do, and one of the priorities I have when I'm your state attorney. The second is for the children, and increasing the number of prosecutors that handle exclusively sex abuse and child abuse cases in our circuit, because those are the very toughest cases to prosecute. You have to have prosecutors who have the experience, who have the ability to sit down with those innocent victims and get them to tell the story and be comfortable in telling that story. And they have to be able to have the ability to communicate with them and the ability to perform in trial to get a conviction. In my administration, those are going to be my priorities.
Thank you, sir. Would you like to rebut any of that, Mr. Hess?
You know, that's all very nice. But if your community isn't safe, then the elderly, the children, mamas and dads are all in jeopardy. The primary focus that we have had in the last 7 years is to make sure that the increasing violence is sought out, it's tried, and those who are responsible are punished. You know, back in 1988, the state finally started to put some teeth in the law. And with the 1020 life law, taking the sentencing guidelines and freeing the judges from those restraints, we've put a lot of the very dangerous people in prison, and our streets are safer for it, our crime rate is down, and you know, until we all have a safe community, the elderly and the children don't have a safe community either. So our focus is to see that the overall community is taken care of, particularly with violence like we saw here in Chickley this week.
And Mr. Wilson, would you like to add?
Obviously, the priority of the state attorney's office is to prosecute all cases and all crimes and to ensure the safety of our community overall. But when you look at where you allocate the resources and you look at the volume of cases that we're seeing day in and day out of child molesters, of sexual predators, of people traveling to have sex with minors, of people abusing the elderly, Those cases require focus. They require specialization. You have, and we have, the prosecutors that have the ability to handle the cases of general crimes. But the most difficult cases are not the murder cases. The most difficult cases are those child abuse cases and those elderly exploitation cases, because those are the victims that are most vulnerable and have the inability to communicate effectively with police, with the prosecution, and with the jury. And those cases are the very most difficult. And if we can't protect them in doing our job, then we don't need to be in this business.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Wilson, you will start this next question and go first. Nearly 1% of the United States population is incarcerated. Should more or fewer people be incarcerated, or should we look toward more rehabilitative, structured functions as far as law enforcement and the enforcement of that law enforcement?
Well, I can tell you this. The more prisons you build, the more people you're going to put in. And the more crimes that you have to send people to prison for is not going to solve the problem. When you take the stigma out of going to prison, when it becomes sensationalized and glamorized in the media, and the sting of going to jail, going to prison is lost, then the values of the community is lost. Prison needs to be for the most violent. Prison needs to be for the career offenders. It needs to be for the people who are not acceptable in our society because they do not obey our laws, and they're not going to obey our laws. There needs to be, and there is currently, the approach taken where we look at the offender, we look at the offense, we look at the victim, and we look at societal's needs. And what we say is, use good judgment. Doing the right thing is a great slogan, it's a great quip, but it doesn't tell you what to do. Because doing the right thing is different for the victim, different for law enforcement, different for what's right in the community, and what may be right for that particular defendant. So what you have to focus on is each individual case. Identify the career offenders, remove them from our society. Identify the violent offenders, remove them from our society. Help those that want help. Help those that need a little wake-up call, a little shake. Get them back on the right track. Because the end goal is to have productive members of society contributing to the growth and well-being of our communities.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hess.
You know, when I was a circuit judge, I had a philosophy. The people that came before me fell in usually two groups: those who were dumb and those who were dangerous. Our job is to put those who are dangerous away for as long as we possibly can. And with the 1020 life laws, we have put a lot of people in prison so they don't prey on our communities. And that's why our crime rate's going down. Then you have those that just, I call them the dumb. But those are the ones who have no structure in their lives. They have no direction. You know, the court system has the ability to get their attention and to focus their efforts. We put them on probation, we give them some rules to live by, and they're going to violate them, they're going to break them because they're not used to that. The court has to work with them to see that they continue on that path. But you know, there are some people that just can't be rehabilitated. They just don't want to play the game. There's always time for them in prison. And we talk about allocation of resources in the community, and there are precious few resources. We have 2 dedicated prosecutors in my office. We have one for drugs, we have one for crimes against children. But there's not enough money for more. We have 2 lawyers per division in Panama City, and we do the best we can in the outlying counties. In the next 3 or 4 years, we want to see the resurgence of the prosecution in the Panama City office, put 3 attorneys in each division. We want to see that the attorneys in the outlying areas have the support they need to keep their communities safe. And we continue to remember that there are some people who just are not going to be able to function in society in a safe manner. And so that will be our focus. That's why we have a major crimes unit. That's why our major crimes unit is so successful.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wilson, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I would agree that the resources of the State Attorney's Office need to be increased. We're at the level, the lowest level it's been since Mr. Hess took office, and that's due to the economy and the legislature allocating less resources to the agency. But the difference is between myself and Mr. Hess, bringing a business model approach from my experience in private practice to make sure that our resources are utilized as efficiently and effectively as possible. I will make certain that any waste that we have in that office in positions that are created just for political purposes are eliminated. That the people who work there, and I'm going to tell you, we've got the best staff that I've ever seen. I've been a part of 4 different state attorney administrations, and this is the hardest working staff I've ever seen. But there is room for improvement. And there's room in that budget for salaries of over $100,000 to put people in the positions that I'm talking about. The improvement needs to be made, the waste needs to be cut, and we need to move forward. And we need to do it effectively and efficiently.
Mr. Hess will give you the last word on that.
Well, when you consider that we're winning more trials at a higher rate than ever before in the circuit, that's pretty efficient.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Hess, you'll be first on this next question. How have, if at all, minimum mandatory guidelines affected the administration of justice?
One of the nice things about minimum mandatories is it gives the prosecutor an opportunity to charge in a way that suits the crime. We have sentencing guidelines. Essentially, there's a calculus that a judge goes through to see what an appropriate crime sentence would be for each person. But mandatory minimums basically say, look, there are certain things that you just will not do. And if you do them, then you're going to go to prison for a long time. The use of a gun is one of those. And so the mandatory minimums have allowed us to take those people who are going to be a problem, and they are a problem, and put them in the prison system, and we don't have to worry about liberal judges leaving them out on probation or a very light sentence. The mandatory minimums that we have are under attack right now in Tallahassee. As the crime rate has gone down, the legislatures have been looking to cut the DOC budget. They've been looking to cut the prosecutor's budget because, after all, crime is down. It's one of those pendulum things. When crime goes down, it's because we've been doing a good job. You don't need to take your foot off the pedal. You need to keep it going full speed ahead. And so that's our job in Tallahassee, to make sure the legislature understands that the successes we have been paid for, and we need to keep paying for them so that we keep our neighborhoods safe.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wilson.
Minimum mandatories are like anything else. It's a tool, and the prosecution can use that tool to the benefit. It is not necessarily something that needs to be applied in every circumstance. And the attorneys need to understand that when you charge a case, and in our office they understand this, that when you charge a case, you look at all the available resources to get to the result that you're looking at. So when you evaluate the case and say, okay, based on the type of crime that was committed, based on the criminal history of the defendant, based on the status of the victim, as in victim input, based on law enforcement's input, and what the judge in that particular courtroom will do. Because each and every judge has their own set standards that they apply. And in every circuit, in every court in this circuit, those judges apply their own standards. And what one judge will insist upon as a plea or as a sentence, another judge will not. So the prosecutors in our office work with their judges. They have one judge they work for typically, and they understand what's acceptable in that division, in that courtroom. But the minimum mandatories, sometimes if you look at a blanket approach to anything, you will always find exceptions. And so what has to be evaluated and examined in making a good prosecution decision and moving forward is, what is the end result we're trying to achieve? And if utilizing a minimum mandatory sentence to achieve that is what's right in that particular case, it needs to be used. And if it's not, then it doesn't need to be used, and you need to be charging it differently. And the attorneys in our office know that, and they do a very good job of that.
Mr. Hess, would you like to reply?
That's why our rule is do the right thing. Look at all the facts, look at the case, look at the people, and do the right thing. Do the thing that when you go home, you can say, I've done well today, I have done the right thing, I treated people correctly. And there's another side of this. We have some judges in this circuit who say, my policy is the minimum. Policies don't fit every situation. You need to look at the case, you need to look at the person, and you need to make sure that that person gets the justice they deserve, not just what your policy is. And so that's why we continue to say, do the right thing.
And Mr. Wilson will give you the last word on this.
Again, the do the right thing slogan is nice. It's like saying just no to drugs. It sounds good, it makes you feel good, but it doesn't give you direction, because each and every case is unique. And you have to apply those standards and those criteria that I just spoke of in order to evaluate and in order to successfully prosecute the case and to come to the correct conclusion. If I came to you and said, hey, I've got this situation, and you answer me, do the right thing, you've given me no leadership, you've given me no instruction. But you come to me and I'm going to tell you, here's how you look at the case. Let's evaluate the type of crime, let's look at the defendant's history, let's look at the impact from the victim, let's look at the impact from law enforcement, and let's look at the community standards that are expected from that type of crime in the community where you're prosecuting. That's how you effectively prosecute.
Thank you, sir. This next question is sort of a homogenized combination of several that were submitted. At least in these outer counties outside of Bay County, only about 30% of the population pay ad valorem taxes, and commensurate state and county coffers are always tight. Does the state's attorney's office have adequate resources, including money? And if not, what could be done to better make use of those available funds? And Mr. Wilson, you're first on this.
Well, when you ask a government employee, do they need more money, the answer is always yes. If you ask an agency head, do we need more money, more resources, the answer is always yes, because we want to do more. And you think that if you have more, then you can perform better and you can have everything that you need and all the tools that you need. But the reality is this: somebody has to pay for that. And that somebody is all the taxpayers. Everybody that's working for a living has to pay the taxes to support our government, to support the prosecution, to support the law enforcement. And so the agency heads have to keep in mind that it's the taxpayers that are funding all the initiatives that you're seeking. And it's your obligation to be a good steward of tax dollars to make sure the public who is providing that tax base get the very best service that is provided, and that can be provided. And that means you have to look at innovative ways to reduce workload, use technology, to expand services, and be able to cut the cost at the same time. And you can't do that if you just say, well, I like to do things, but the budget doesn't permit. You've got to be innovative and creative, and you've got to find the solutions, and you've got to be engaged to do that. It's a cop-out to say, there's programs I'd like to implement, but I just don't have the budget for it. If it's important to you, if it's important to this community, it's your state attorney's job to find a way to make it happen. And if I'm the president of the FPAA and I go to the legislature, I assure you, I'm going to get funding for the FPAA and the prosecutors. I'm not going to come back where the public defender gets funding for more positions than the prosecutors got this term.
Mr. Hess.
The state attorney's office is not funded through ad valorem taxation. We're funded through the state budget, general revenue. Now, think about, I'll go to Tallahassee and I'll get money for you. You know, there's some really good state attorneys in this state, and the last several sessions, we haven't really gotten anything. The long and short of it is that they feel like with the crime rate going down because we've done a good job, we have less work to do, and we need less. That's the mindset in the state attorneys, in the legislature as to the state attorneys. And you talk about savings. You know, before I took office, everybody had a truck, everybody drove their truck home. We've made a lot of changes, we made a lot of savings. But I want to throw in a word from our financial officer, Peggy Peacock. She's been with Jim Alpman, she's been with Steve Meadows, and she's our financial officer, and she does a great job of seeing that our budget is balanced. Now, there was a talk about training, about the direction that our prosecutors have. Telling them to do the right thing, that's just not good enough. Folks, we have training, we have regular training, and our prosecutors are trained month after month about doing the right thing. They're not working in a vacuum. You don't have to wait to go see the state attorney. The state attorney makes sure that you have the training and you have the direction all along the way. I'm building new lawyers. When I did the invocation, or when I took office and gave my oath, one of the things I said is, I am training the judges 20 years from now. I take that very personally, and I take that it's a very important task. The training that we are doing today is preparing our judges. And so we're not just training them in the rules of evidence or the rules of procedure, we're teaching them the things that they need to know to make good decisions. And they have that every time they pick up a case file, they have that every time they make a decision on a case.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wilson, would you like to rebut any of that?
The only thing I'd like to add to that is that, yes, I agree, absolutely, training is important. But the thing about training is you've got to have training that is effective. You have got to have people leading, people who are teaching, people who are competent in what the material that they are instructing you on. And sometimes we get that and sometimes we don't. Just to say we have a training program isn't enough. You have to have training that actually impacts and incorporates the ideas and the values and the nuances of the law that are going to apply so that you are successful and can utilize those tools. One of the things that I was successful in convincing Mr. Hess to do was to offer an incentive program for attorneys who become board certified in criminal trial law, because that is a regimented course where you have to be educated, evaluated, tested. You have to take another bar exam to become a board certified criminal trial attorney. And I was able to convince Mr. Hess, and he agreed, that if anybody wanted to attend those courses and get that training, that we would provide the finances for them to do that. And that if they successfully completed it and become board certified, making them better prosecutors, better able to serve the community, then they would get them a raise. And I thought that was appropriate. So I agree that training is important, but you have to have effective training.
And Mr. Hess will give you the last word.
Well, let me throw out 3 names to you, see if you recognize them. Larry Bassford, Bob Sombathy, Bob Pell. 3 of the best lawyers in this circuit. They're the lawyers who handle our training. You can't do better than that. And like Forrest Gump, that's all I've got to say about that.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hess, you will answer this next question first. What are 3 things which can be improved at the state's attorney's office?
I think one of the first things that anybody in that office needs to recognize is we have a retention problem. These lawyers come to us, we begin them at a salary that is less than a prison guard. We ask them to commit to us for 3 years. We train them how to try a case and how to become a lawyer. And often, because of the financial pressures of their student loans or their family life, they have to leave the state attorney's office to seek employment elsewhere. That's one of the first things that we need to do. Second, we have a number of needs in the circuit that aren't being met right now. One of the needs that is not being met is we need to have a I'm going to call it a deputy sharing program. We have investigators, the investigators for the Sheriff's Department, but what we need to do is we need to start having an exchange where those people who are working for the Sheriff's Department understand what the State Attorney's Office does, and the State Attorney's people understand a little bit better what the Sheriff's Office does. An arrest is made on probable cause, basically 51% of the evidence. But a trial has to have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. There is a gap between what the law enforcement officers are used to doing to do their job and make an arrest versus what the state attorneys, prosecutors have to do to take a case to trial. I want to see an exchange program where we send investigators to the Sheriff's Department to help them see where we need to be, and we'd like to have some of the Sheriff's deputies or the officers from the police department come to the state attorney's office to see firsthand how the prosecutor's office acts. And hopefully between that interaction there will be a pollination and a better working relationship between the 2.
And second.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Well, first and foremost, I think it's incumbent upon the state attorney to lead the way, to put himself forward, to go to the agency heads, the sheriffs, the police chiefs, to sit down with them, find out what the problems are, find out what situations they're facing, financially, recruitment, retention, training, and help them to make better cases. But you have to go there. You have to go to them, and you have to sit with them and find out what are the needs that you're facing as an agency head. And then you need to take that information back to your agency, and you need to incorporate those so that we're all working together in a team approach so that we're all protecting the community, which is our job. That's number 1, and that's incumbent upon the state attorney. Number 2, leadership. The leadership needs to be led from the front. The state attorney needs to be accessible, he needs to be available, he needs to be around. He needs to be in touch with the community leaders and knowing what the circumstances are and the problems that they're facing. Bring that back to the office. Make sure that each one of his prosecutors are aware of the needs in their community. Have them with them. That's important. So leadership, that's number 2. Number 3, he is right about retention. Retention is an issue that's facing all the state attorneys in the state due to money. He's exactly right about the burden that our prosecutors have when they come out of law school with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of student loan debt, and they start off making $40,000 a year. We have to recruit, retain, and train the very best. That's the biggest problem that we face at the state attorney's office, because those are the future leaders at the state attorney's office, and it's correct that the biggest portion of our judicial pool candidates come from the state attorney's office. Those are the three things that I think are most important.
Thank you, Mr. Hess.
Each one of our major agencies has a prosecutor that is assigned to assist them in making cases. For example, Mr. Bassford works exclusively or heavily with the Bay County Sheriff's Department. Bob Sombathy works with the Panama City Police Department. Bob Pell works with the Marine Patrol, with the Highway Patrol and Marine Patrol. You know, we have liaisons with the different agencies. They do have their problems. They have their training issues, and we have ours. But you know, the real problem with training between lawyers and police officers is there's this thing called Florida Law Weekly. It doesn't seem that there's a week that goes by that some appellate court somewhere does not change the law. Our prosecutors have to stay on top of that. The problem is that a lot of times our law enforcement agencies don't have the resources to stay abreast, and they don't have the training facilities to keep everybody going. We are, however, going to start publishing a newspaper. We had been publishing a thing that had been sent to all the law enforcement agencies, keeping up to date on the law. That seems to have fallen off a little bit, but now that we know that, we're going to reestablish it. The law enforcement agencies need to know what the appellate courts are saying, just like the prosecutors, and we have a plan in place to begin doing that.
Another chance.
Again, it's not incumbent upon our chief assistants or our assistant state attorneys to carry the load. Leadership comes from the top. The buck stops with the state attorney. It's a state attorney that needs to be sitting down with these agency heads. It's a state attorney that needs to be going through and assessing what the needs are of the agencies that we serve. It is the state attorney that needs to bring that information back, and he's responsible for making sure that his policies are coherently communicated, that everybody understands what the role is, what the job is, what the expectations are. And then you give the employees the latitude to do that job. And if there's any miscommunication, it's incumbent upon the state attorney to clear it up. You don't send a mediator, you don't send a third party, you handle it yourself, because that's where you have miscommunication.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson, you'll be first on this next question. Bearing in mind that you've already had the opportunity to introduce yourselves to us tonight and have laid out basically your history and heritage, what's your biggest strength as our next state attorney?
My biggest strength is I'm energized, I'm focused, I'm ready to work, I'm involved in the community, I've continued to be involved in the community, even with the position of Chief Assistant State Attorney and all of that entails. I've managed to serve on boards in Bay County and different civic organizations to make sure that I'm in touch with the needs of the community. The biggest thing I bring is a holistic approach. I've been a police officer making cases, I've been a prosecutor prosecuting cases, I've been a defense attorney defending cases, I've been a business owner managing a budget, meeting overhead. The only thing I haven't done in the criminal justice system is be a judge. Being a prosecutor, a police officer, and a defense attorney, you're doing the work. You're presenting the cases, you're advocating. That's what I bring to the table. The experience that I've had having worked in all 6 of these communities, handling caseloads, not just coming in to try 1 or 2 special cases, but handling caseloads, working with our law enforcement and the victim advocates and the members of the community. I bring that approach because I'm the boots on the ground, and I've made sure that I'm continually walking around and being engaged.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hess.
I think you want to know about my strengths as a state attorney? All right. You know, experience counts. In front of you, you have 2 brochures, one for Mr. Wilson and one for me. Put them up together and compare them. Now, talk about community involvement. I've been on any number of boards. Juvenile Justice Committee, been on the Council on Aging, it goes on and on. As a state attorney, my focus has been on our relationship with the court system. Our relationship with the court system. Now, as a circuit judge, what did I see? I saw all kinds of things in all kinds of cases. You want to talk about understanding divorces? I understand. You want to talk about understanding criminal cases? I understand. But let's talk about the training that the state attorney has. I graduated from the National Judicial College. I've graduated from the Florida Advanced Studies for Judges. I've also become death qualified as a circuit judge. I understand the court system, and that's where we work. We work in the court system. Now, the suggestion that the state attorney should be going to every one of the agencies, that's silly. You can't possibly do that. We have assistants, and the assistants have to be helping the state attorney get the job done. That's why we have assistants. For example, when we have somebody, like we had just the other night, there was a shooting. The state attorney can't always go to the scene. One of his assistants has to go. But we talked about the problems with the court system. How about overcrowding in the jail? How are we going to solve that? Well, we've been working on that. I've been working on that with the judges, the court administrators, the sheriffs, and the police chiefs. The idea that the state attorney is going to go to every agency and make sure that they have all the things that they need is just really beyond the scope of anything that the state attorney can do.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wilson, would you like to rebut?
Absolutely. I completely disagree. It is the job of the state attorney to get out into the community. It is the job of the state attorney to reach out to law enforcement to find out what their needs are. And you do have the ability and you do have the time to do it. And if you don't have it, you need to make it. Otherwise, you can find another job. Because that's what matters. Making sure that the state attorney is there for his community. Getting out, getting into the community, getting into the agencies, figuring out the problems, finding solutions, rolling up your sleeves, and losing sleep if you have to get it done. Excuses like, I've got assistant state attorneys to handle that for me, that's not going to fly. As your state attorney, I am going to visit with all the chiefs, I am going to visit with all the sheriffs, and we are going to work on their problems. Now, I'm not going to be able to solve everybody's problem at all. That's unrealistic. But I'm accessible, and I will listen, and I will offer suggestions, and I will do everything I can to assist you and help you, because that's the job of the state attorney.
Thank you. And you've got the final word on this, Mr. Hess.
You know, he's been the chief assistant now for 6 years. What's he been doing?
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Hess, you'll be first on this next one. What is your biggest frustration as a prosecutor?
I guess I could say this time in chief, the public defender's office, but not really. The frustration that we have as prosecutors is that there is more work than our people can possibly do. You know, I talked earlier about how caseloads have been going down, the number of crimes have been going down. But the work of our prosecutors has been going up because there's so much more to a case today than there ever was before. For example, every time a defendant makes a call from the jail, that's recorded. And you know, a lot of times in those phone calls are some real good information. But it takes hours and hours of listening to hear what's on those tapes. So while we may have fewer cases, there is much more work for a case to be done. Our attorneys have, just say, a 28-day month. Out of that 28 days, they only have 5 days at their desk to actually do their work. They have to review cases, they have to do research, they have to do filings, they have to prepare pleadings for the court. And you know, it just isn't really enough time for them to do everything they need to do. That's why so many of our attorneys were working in the evenings and on the weekends. The frustration is that in Tallahassee, they don't appreciate the work that the prosecutors are doing around the state, and they think it's time to cut the budget. We're hoping that through our efforts this year, we're going to be able to get all state employees a raise of 3 to 5%. State employees haven't received a raise in years. And so the frustration is that while our people are doing a good job and they're working harder, the recognition by the legislature is not there, and the tools the tools that are available to them are much greater. They just have a hard time messing it all together.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wilson.
I'm going to agree that the frustration is there are some budgetary constraints, but that's not a good enough excuse. To say that the legislature earmarked salary incentive increases just for attorneys is one thing, and that did happen, and attorneys got those salary increases. But that does not impact the rest of your budget. And to say that you exclude another class of employees based on their positioning due to providing only for the attorneys is just wrong. Because you do have the money in the budget to allocate for merit raises if you look at salaries and you adjust salaries, and when you have positions that become available, you utilize those resources to increase the pay. Now, when you have a motivated secretarial staff, you have a more efficient office. I learned this in private practice. If I had 2 good assistants, they could do more work and allow me to do more work to bring in more income than if I had 2 attorneys. So, looking at the value of staff and making sure that they're compensated, you set the tone for your priorities. The legislature can say, you know what, we're only earmarking $15,000 this year for your agency to distribute only to attorneys. Fantastic, that $15,000 goes to the attorneys. But guess what? There's room in the budget. You can make room in the budget. You can find the resources to reward those who are putting in the effort, who are staying those extra hours, who are working those extra cases that we're talking about, and making sure that they're appreciated and they're compensated.
Mr. Hess, would you like to rebut?
Shortly after I took office, our $8 million budget was cut by $1.5 million. We've had to make do with a whole lot less. There have been merit increases. I thought this started off as a discussion about giving increases to all staff. But when there are merit increases, when there is merit, there have been merit raises. The problem is that we're not allowed to have car washes in order to raise money to pay our staff. We have things that we have to do. We have requirements that we have to meet. And you know, a lot of the things that you're hearing tonight, you would think that basically the staff of the state attorney's office is not behind Glenn Hess. All you have to do is look around this room, or better yet, look at the parades, look at the forums. My staff has come out to support me, and they come out to support me for one thing. They know that in the last 7 years, they've had a better work environment, they've had a better boss, and they appreciate it.
Thank you. And Mr. Wilson, you have final word on this one?
I'm going to agree that they have had a better work environment, because I've been there to ensure and protect them as best as possible from some of these things that I disagree with, such as no pay increase for staff. I found ways to increase duties to show there was an increase in responsibility to get some staff merit pay raises, in spite of the no raise standard that Mr. Hess set. We have a hard-working staff. He's fortunate to have a dedicated staff. He's very fortunate to have the workers that are in that state attorney's office that are there. I hope that they stay there. I hope that they continue to thrive there. And I promise that as their state attorney, I'm going to continue to protect them and look after them and advance them like I have everybody else, because it is a team, and every integral part of that team is part of the team, not just your high-paid special attorneys.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Wilson, you'll be first on this next one. Addressing the workload on the staff of the state's attorney's office. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being having the luxury of sitting around with your feet on the desk, and 10 being, oh my God, what have we got ourselves into? What level of work and subsequent anxiety do you feel that the prosecutors are experiencing in the office? And you're first on this, Mr. Wilson.
Well, I would say we're at about a 7, and it's going to depend on which division you're in, because at different times of the year, I can tell you the misdemeanor division in Bay County during spring break, not so bad this year, but in years past, they'd be at a 10 during whole spring break. And I can tell you that the felony caseload, averaging over 300 per attorney in Bay County, they'll tell you that they're close to a 10. Overall, I would say when you average it all out, we're at about a 7. They are working very hard. They're working harder than they should have to work, but we're not in crisis mode yet. I have seen it where it was in crisis mode when we first started, and we had a huge drop, and we had to overcome that. People had to double up on their duties, and I've witnessed that and been a part of that. But I would say that we're at a high 7 right now. The caseloads that the attorneys are trying to manage, it is manageable, but we're not far from that tipping point where it becomes unmanageable if there is major events in our community, and we see an uptick in major crimes, violent crimes, and things of that nature.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hess.
7's a good number, but then again, it all depends which division you're in and what time of the year it is. You know, one of the things that we did in our administration was we looked at spring break. Every year the courts were clogged, the prosecutors were overworked, and as a result, the system just did not work. We began a misdemeanor diversion program. We were able to resolve tens of thousands of cases in the last few years by an innovative approach. A state attorney operated misdemeanor diversion program. Now, as far as the attorneys and the workload that they have right now, we're very fortunate, like was said, we have a dedicated staff. They work on the weekends, they work at night. One of the things that we're trying to do is through a reevaluation of the budget under a new chief assistant, we're trying to place additional prosecutors in the different divisions in Bay County where the most work is. And I'm very encouraged by the numbers that we have right now that we're going to be able to do that. But the problem really in the state attorney's office is retention. As the market gets better for private attorneys, we lose our felony attorneys. The charge that we have is to see that we hire good people in misdemeanor divisions, we train them, we bring them up, and we put them in the felony divisions where the most work needs to be done. And the process that we've had with our training has been excellent. The people that we have in our felony divisions are all good people. They're doing good work, and obviously they're doing well at trial.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wilson, would you like to rebut?
I think that one's been covered pretty well.
And Mr. Hess, anything that you would like to add?
I agree.
Let's be positive here for a moment. What do you see as the best part of serving as the state attorney? And Mr. Hess, you'll be first.
The best part about being the state attorney is being able to make a difference. You know, when I sat on the bench, I couldn't deal with anything until it came to me. But as a state attorney, I can deal with things way upstream. First of all, I can see that those really crummy cases don't get put into the court system. I can see that those cases that need good attention get good attention. I can also say that as a state attorney, I've had a chance to show this community what an upstanding, moral state attorney's office can do. And I'm very proud of the reputation that our people have. I'm very proud of the work that they've done. And the gratifying part of it all is that we're driving the train. We're not just calling balls and strikes.
Mr. Wilson.
Well, I can't say, I haven't been the state attorney yet. But I can tell you that my experience as a chief assistant and as a prosecutor, that the most important and most valuable thing that I had was the relationships. The relationship that you had with law enforcement, the relationships that you had with the victims, the relationships that you had with the community. Building those bridges and working together, that's the power of the state attorney. That's where you actually have an impact on your community. That's where you get to make a difference. And when you're leading an organization of over 100 dedicated personnel who have one goal and one mission in mind, and that's to make the community as safe as possible and to be there for the community and do the very best to address their needs, protect them, make sure that the most violent criminals and the career offenders are removed from our community, that is satisfying. It's the same thing as a police officer. The first time that you get to help a child or you help a citizen and you see that relief and you see that appreciation in their eyes, it's a calling. It's something that gets in you and it's hard to get out. And as a prosecutor, it's the same thing. You get to wear the white hat. You get to be the good guy. You get to look in the mirror the other day and say, you know what? I made a difference. I helped. And I may have helped just one person, one victim, one officer make a better case, but I did it. I made a difference. And you can't find that in any other position as an attorney. Now, you can find it as a teacher, you can find it as a nurse, you can find it as a first responder, you can find it as a serviceman or woman serving our country. But that calling, that sense that you get when you actually make a difference in people's lives, there's nothing like it.
even though that wasn't a contentious question, I'll give you a chance, Mr. Hess, to add anything if you'd like.
You know, essentially, the state attorney is the moral quarterback of the system. The moral quarterback of the system. And that's the one thing that I really enjoy about the state attorney's office. We make a difference because we set the tone for our communities. And I'm proud of the tone that we've set. I'm proud of the performance of our state attorney's office. I'm proud of the reputation that we have built throughout the community in the 7 years that I've been the state attorney. That's the satisfying part.
And Mr. Wilson, you have final word.
I can't agree more. It was a fine team. I've been proud to be a part of that team and to help lead that team. I will tell you that as a state attorney, I'm going to continue to be innovative. I'm going to find more ways. I'm going to bring more people on board who have the same desire to serve, the same energy, that want to be doing something for their community, want to be making a difference. Seeking them out, bringing them, leading them, and going further and forward, farther than the state attorney's office has ever been before, in the right direction. That's what I'm here for, and that's the job I want to do for you.
Each candidate will now have 2 minutes. We'll start with Mr. Hess, and you have your first 2 minutes.
It's an election year, and boy, the things that we hear in an election year. But you know, let's stop and take a look at this. In court, one of the questions that is permitted is, what is the witness's reputation for truth and veracity? What is his reputation for peacefulness? What is his reputation? And the reason they have reputation testimony is because it's not just what somebody is going to say on one occasion. It's the history, it's the momentum, it's who they are, because they've shown it over a period of time. Now, I want you to stop and sit and think. All the things that you've heard today about the state attorney's office, have you heard anybody else say those things? Or is this just an election year rhetoric? Doesn't the state attorney's office have a reputation for doing the right thing? Doesn't the state attorney's office have a reputation for moral direction? Doesn't the state attorney's office have a reputation for doing a good job? Have you heard anybody that has had anything to say about the state attorney's office? And have you heard more than one person say it? I'm proud to say for the last 7.5 years, people come up to me and they say, hey, what's going on down in the state attorney's office? We haven't heard a thing. Well, that's the point. You're not supposed to hear a thing. We're not supposed to be an embarrassment to the community. We're supposed to do our job. We're supposed to have people, we're supposed to generate faith in people. That the state attorney's office is doing the right thing and they're doing the job. And I challenge you tonight.
Time.
What are people on the street saying about the state attorney's office? They're saying good things. And that's the record that I'm running on.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wilson.
In this election, you've got a choice. And the choice is, we can stay right where we're at and say, you know what, good's good enough. Or you can move forward. And you can say, you know what, let's set the bar higher. Let's move forward. Let's challenge ourselves. Let's challenge our leadership, and let's do more for our community. I'm the candidate that wants to raise the bar, wants to raise the standard, and wants to give you more. I want to make sure that we are all moving in the right direction. There's a fantastic team at the state attorney's office, and they do a hell of a job. And I'm proud of them. I'm proud to have served with them and worked with them, all of them, from the attorneys to the staff. But we can do more, we can do better. It takes the leadership, it takes the motivation, it takes the energy, and it takes the desire to get out there, to be innovative, to ask the tough questions, to go where there are hard questions hit to you, where you have to find answers that aren't readily apparent, that can't be solved with a quip or a quote, where you have to roll up your sleeves, find out what's really going on, and how can we better serve our community, and how can we help you. How do we allocate those resources, the limited resources, to make sure the community is being protected the most? Well, you've got to seek those answers. You can't just sit back and say, well, it's dependent on somebody else, the legislature, or it's dependent on somebody else to do it for me. Send my assistants to do the talking. The state attorney is the leader in the community. The state attorney is the one that needs to be working with the sheriffs, the police chiefs, all of the agencies in the community, and he's the one that they need to turn to and say, hey, where do we go? And he needs to sit down and say, you know what? What are your issues? How can I help you? And what is the focus? There's a choice in this election, and the choice is we can say good's good enough, and that's fine. If that's what the voters want, I'll abide by it, and that's what they're going to get. But if they want more, if they want better, if they want progress, if they want to raise the standard, I'm the candidate, and I commit to be there for you, to work for you, and to be diligent.
Have you anything else to offer, Mr.
Sorry,
Hess?
I'm not sure what you said.
Or theory, either one. Mr. Hess, is there anything you'd like to add?
Diligent. We've been diligent. We've done a good job. We've done the job that you've hired us to do. We've done the job that you've asked us to do. And we've done it well. And you know, at the end of the day, all the talk about what they're going to do, haven't seen it. What you've seen from the state attorney's office is a professional, moral operation, professional moral performance, and professional moral results. And you just have to look back a few years to draw the comparison. I'm proud of what we've done. I'm proud of who we are. And we'll continue to make you proud of your state attorney's office the next 4 years.
Thank you. And Mr. Wilson, you have a final word.
It is an election year, and you will hear from me the things that I want to do. The difference is Mr. Hess has been in office for 8 years. If something hasn't been done, it should have already been done. Some of the things that you see that are my initiatives, I'm proud to see that they're taken up and they are actually going forward with those. Happy to see that. One of the things I want to see is a veterans court. Therapeutic Justice Court does not address the issues of our veterans. The people who have put their lives on the line for us, who have served in combat or in any military aspect and have a service-related injury that causes them to be in front of the criminal justice system, deserve special treatment. And Therapeutic Justice Court isn't enough. There are 13 circuits that have Veterans Court and a mental health court and a drug court. And I want to make the state attorney's office, the 14th circuit, the 14th one to have a veterans court to address the special needs of our veterans. Those things should have been done by this administration, and it hasn't been done. When you look to the future, and you look to the past, and you get to see if it should have been done, why hasn't it happened?
Mr. Hess?
You know, it kind of amazes me. There's a suggestion that Glenn Hess doesn't care about veterans. Just pick up that card and see who I am. Just go to Memorial Day and see who I am. But you know, this thing about we need this and we need that, Therapeutic Court isn't doing enough for veterans. There are 11 people on the docket right now in the Therapeutic Court. Only 6 of those are veterans. And there are many more slots that they weren't filled. If there was a need for Veterans Court, Judge Overstreet would have been the first one to call it. But the fact of the matter is, the needs of our veterans in the court system are being met. The state attorney's office has been supporting the Therapeutics Court. We've been working with the veterans that have taken that option. The idea that somehow or other we need this and we need that just might not be borne out by the facts.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wilson, again, last word.
I strongly disagree because the Therapeutic Justice Court addresses mental illnesses for anybody. It's like if you have a general practitioner, but you have a special injury that needs to be treated. You need specialization. You need someone who is in tune with what the options are, what the services are that are available, and not just a one-size-fits-all if you have some type of mental illness. It should be our veterans deserve better treatment, and they deserve a specialized court, just like it's been recognized in 13 other circuits. And the state attorney should have taken the lead on this prior to the implementation of the Therapeutic Justice Court coming to pass.
All Are we good where we're at? Would you like to contribute anything else? We've got a little time.
What are you doing? This is going back and forth here?
As far as I'm concerned, yeah. I'm looking for a fist fight. That's all I care about. Kidding, just kidding. Mr. Hess.
You know, Veterans Court, Therapeutics Court. Read the statute, see what the requirements are. They're really just two names for the same word. The fact that we have a therapeutic court and there are only 6 veterans in it tells you one thing. We don't have that many veterans who need specialized court. Now, unless of course you're saying that if you're a veteran, you get specialized treatment. I'm a veteran. I don't want specialized treatment. I just want the treatment that I deserve. And essentially, they're getting it through this court system. Those who have PTSD, hey look folks, you want to talk about soldiers with special needs? I live with one. I know what it's all about. And if we needed another court, we'd be there. Therapeutic court is doing the job that it needs to be done. It's meeting the needs in Bay County. And the suggestion that it's not just isn't borne out by the facts.
Mr. Wilson.
I think we've covered that topic well enough in this. We're going to disagree on the issue. I think there needs to be a veterans court, and he doesn't.
I'd like to say a very large thank you to both candidates for being here tonight. More importantly, you, without whom we would not be able to have this gathering and this debate. Thank you so much for your attention. Thanks so much for your decorum, and we wish you a very good night.